I'm Fathery.
This is Dave.
This is Brian.
And this is TEX-TREK.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 81st installment of the TEX-TREK podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we talk all about Star Trek, old and new. And tonight we are talking about Star Trek, just simply titled Star Trek.
And it's like the old made new. It's all of our themes together in one.
Indeed. It's kind of like the Nexus. It's like the convergence point outside of time,
Yeah.
within all time.
When we leave this podcast, we could step out anywhere, but I'm personally going to step out to right before Soren launched the rocket. That seems like it's just a cool time.
But this movie also commonly referred to as Star Trek 09 or JJ Trek or Kelvin Trek or Star Trek 11, whatever you want to call it.
Or the movie where they fucked it all up.
Or the movie where they rejuvenated it for a new generation.
Absolutely.
Or a movie that did a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But just for our purposes, we'll refer to it as Star Trek 09. I think that is the most common moniker that this movie receives.
I might call it Kelvin Trek. I don't know.
Well, that applies to 3 movies.
Yeah. I usually prefer 11 just because I want people to realize it counts.
Oh, yeah, I like that
true.
as a little tweak to the canon fighters.
Just like I went around referring to the most recent Ghostbusters as Ghostbusters 3.
I appreciate your trolling.
But this movie, of course, written by Roberto Orci, or Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orci. I think that's the order that their names appear in the credits.
I'll take your word.
They make a big deal out of that in their writers' union and stuff.
I forgot about that, yeah.
And directed by the one and only J.J. Abrams.
Right. You might remember him from such movies as Star Wars, Force Awakens, but before that, he was like a TV guy primarily.
He had done Mission Impossible and Cloverfield.
Right.
Was the big things I knew him from.
And the amazing Super 8.
Yes, Super 8, which I had some issues with, but I guess Brian really liked it.
It occurs to me that Super 8 was like very much a sort of little proto Stranger Things.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think Stranger Things would exist without Super
That was Stranger Things was after this though. Just to
And in TV land, he had done Alias, kicked off Lost,
Felicity.
But
this movie came out 10 years ago. Hard to believe it's already been 10 years. So we're talking about it on the 10th anniversary. And 2019 has been the anniversary for several of these movies. I haven't been bringing it up like I intended to, and I always end up forgetting about it, but this is the 40th anniversary for the motion picture, 35 for Search for Spock, 30 for The Final Frontier, 25 for Generations, and 10 for 09.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So this is a big anniversary year.
I guess there's a lot of Star Trek stories floating around out there.
But, that happens when you have 13 movies, I guess. And I just want to...
Marvel Universe laughs at it.
I just want to go back in time through a red matter wormhole to 2009 and remind everyone what was going on back then.
Okay.
We hadn't had any Star Trek for 4 years.
Since the end of Enterprise.
Yes, which was a sad time for me. I was a baby when Next Generation started in the 80s. And then I had Star Trek regularly all my life until we got to Enterprise, which had an amazing 4th season that I love, and then ended on a terrible episode, and it was such a sad, tragic note to cancel the show on, and then nothing for 4 years until this.
Yeah, it kind of felt like Trek might have died, and like what Battlestar Galactica had been kind of come along in that time, right?
Yes, and also Doctor Who made its big return.
Yeah. So Doctor Who felt like it was almost carrying the weight of the sort of hopeful future, sort of, even though it's a little bit more space fantasy somewhat.
Yeah. I had to confess, I was so happy Doctor Who came back, I hardly noticed Star Trek. It went down, disappeared. I was whatever.
Not me though. This was.
I get it was a big deal for people.
I expected that Galactica was going to be like the through line for a while, where like darker sci-fi was going to kind of take over.
Well, this time period is kind of a low point for me. I was having my Trek withdrawals, and in 2007 at Comic-Con, they had a big event where they announced that Leonard Nimoy was going to be Spock in this movie directed by J.J. Abrams, but also this guy Zachary Quinto from the show Heroes was going to be Spock. And I was just thinking, oh my god, what is going on here? I was very nervous about J.J. Abrams because I hadn't really watched too much of his stuff, but two of my other big loves besides Star Trek are Superman and Transformers. Mm-hmm. And JJ had just, a few years earlier than this, had talked to Warner Brothers about doing a Superman movie, which sounded terrible to me. Like, the story of that movie leaked. I think you can read the entire script now, but it sounded like a terrible adaptation of my favorite fictional character. Also, he was using the writers of the Michael Bay Transformer movies. So, one of my other big loves, Transformers, had just been utterly
it had been
slaughtered.
Peed on the same way Bumblebee peed on that scientist guy, or whoever he was.
Agent Simmons.
Yeah, Agent. Yeah,
it was Pete from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yep. He's one of the regular players for the Coen brothers.
And went on to get peed on by a CGI robot.
God damn it.
So I was extremely nervous, but I did have a little bit of faith going in because Nimoy signed on, and Nimoy was a guy who turned down Generations because he didn't like that script. So I was thinking, like, well, maybe it'll be better than Generations, I guess, if I trust Nimoy's judgment. Now,
you know what? I remember, I didn't know any of the sort of, like, prelude stuff. I probably saw, like, occasional stories on the internet about it. But what I remember is the first teaser trailer that I think kind of used, some audio clips from,
Kennedy?
Kennedy, and maybe, I don't know if there was, like, moon landing stuff in there. And I think it did like a pan over of what looked like the saucer section.
People welding the Enterprise.
Yeah, and I remember getting extremely excited, like when that happened, like having a sort of emotional experience in the theater, getting chills when that happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I didn't really believe it up until then.
And that teaser trailer came out with the movie Cloverfield.
Yep.
And then a little bit later, the Bond movie Quantum of Solace. That's when we got like our first true trailer, which had that really, at the time, seemed really weird sequence of Kid Kirk jacking a car and driving it off of a canyon.
Right.
And that trailer got me so excited because I was like, man, this movie looks like it's going to be so energetic and just really, this could be the one to really rejuvenate the franchise. But I was also nervous because it looked like such a departure. And back in these days, my approach to like movies and development was a little bit different. Whereas now I'm like one of the most spoiler phobic people. I don't even like watching trailers for movies after I decide I'm going to see them. But back then, I would look at all the official stuff, and by reading like interviews with the writers and with Abrams, by like looking at any clips or trailers they released. It did kind of help prepare me for the things in this movie that would ultimately bother me, and I think knowing that stuff going into it actually helped. They were smart enough to keep the big story surprises secret, and so I knew there was going to be stuff in here that I didn't like. They were already talking about like JJ is more of a Star Wars kid than a Star Trek kid. They were saying that this is going to be more actiony. They were saying like this isn't your daddy's Star Trek. So I think I was prepared at just the right amount to go in here and have a good time when I finally did see the movie. It was super exciting, and I only regret that I missed out on the true world premiere of this movie. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to tell that story real quickly and then let y'all weigh in on your initial reaction to this movie. But a lot of people don't remember this, but this movie was actually shown to the public here in Austin, Texas, before anywhere else. There was a screening at the Alamo Drafthouse on South Lamar.
So for Star Trek 2?
For Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
I was in Fairbanks, Alaska, and I heard about this screening because I was getting ready to move to Austin at the time.
And they said that they were going to show 10 minutes of footage from this movie. And I thought about going to that, but I was like, oh, it's in South Austin. I live north of Austin, out in the country. It's going to take me like an hour and a half at least to drive there and drive back. I don't want to do that. And they showed the movie, or started to show the Wrath of Khan, and the film broke down in the, I guess in the Kobayashi Maru sequence at the beginning of that movie. And Leonard Nimoy surprised everyone by standing up in the middle of the theater in the audience and said, well, instead of showing us 10 minutes of the new movie, just show us the whole thing. And they played the entire movie just right before the actual world premiere took place in Australia.
Yes.
And so I'm so sad that I missed out on that. And I also never got to see Nimoy before he passed away.
Yeah.
So
that had to have been like a crazy energetic experience.
Yes. Instead, like, I ended up seeing the movie on the actual premiere night at the Bob Bullock IMAX Museum, and I was still like a little nervous going into it, but I walked out of that theater, stuff in it I didn't like, but overall I was both relieved and excited for the future of the franchise, and it was a very positive experience. I had friends who never gave a shit about Star Trek before who were watching this movie, enjoying it, and I actually got a lot of people into watching Prime Trek, all the old shows, because of this movie. So I'm so thankful for this movie being as successful as it was, because we wouldn't be in the what I'm calling the new golden age of Star Trek now, if not for this movie. Even though there's some stuff I have issues with. But what the two of you, what were your initial reactions to this?
Brian?
I was very excited. I loved the trailer with the Kennedy quote and the welding. Mm-hmm. That was exactly what I wanted out of a Star Trek movie. That's not what we got, but that's what I wanted. Right. And so I was very pumped when I saw that trailer. I had been running Star Trek role-playing games pretty much every week for 9 years at that point.
Right.
And in fact was trying to wrap up my game before I moved. And so it was just nonstop Star Trek the whole time for me. But seeing it on the screen, seeing other people talk about Star Trek, it was empowering. It was exciting. I was very pumped. I liked the second trailer. I went to the movie theater, excited, a little nervous, because I'm a judgmental guy who likes to nitpick. So I knew I would, if there were flaws, I would see them. So, and I loved it. It was fun. I didn't necessarily love every aspect of. I had questions. I guess that's a better. I had questions.
Yeah,
was a better way to describe.
Their approach to continuity and plot was sometimes a little loosey goosey.
Yeah, I was like, how did that work? And how did that work? It wasn't so much that I was upset. I was just. I wanted to know more, and there didn't seem to be more coming. But I loved the movie overall. It was great. I saw it like 2 or 3 times in the theater, and it was great. Yeah.
I had a journey to follow with this movie. Father, you've seen me do this with some things where I approach something the first time, I didn't like it. I wasn't quite that harsh. Like, I had good times and I like parts of it. But I remember at some point, I think, while I was watching it that first time, thinking, okay, well, Trek is dead. Because I was like, I felt like the ethos wasn't there, that spirit of searching. I was kind of forgetting that the movies had always been more action-oriented. I'm not saying that it was a fair judgment necessarily, but it is kind of how I felt.
You were also more of like a TOS-only type of guy going into this. You were someone who was very judgmental of Next Generation and the other shows. And you've loosened up on all that stuff.
The interesting effect it had on me was that the immediate effect was... there's actually 2 sort of things. One, I was actually kind of fascinated to see how just people became supercharged about Trek, even people who didn't like Trek. In fact, a lot of people who weren't Trek fans before liked it better than Trek fans in some cases. And I was fascinated by that and happy about that happening. It did make me go back and start to rewatch Next Generation and Voyager and some of those other shows, and it gave me renewed appreciation for them. So that was the first interesting effect where I was like, oh, I kind of judge those shows harshly. Those are much more in line with what I wanted, it turns out.
There is that. I was having a discussion with somebody about how Discovery is more well accepted because the JJ films were so not Trek.
Right.
So Discovery was embraced more thoroughly by fandom because they were closer to that.
Right.
And so you might like TNG and DS9 more because...
it was a weird journey, and then now I've brought it full circle, and in the last few years, I found myself occasionally, for reasons I couldn't quite explain, revisiting these movies. And I think part of it was, all 3 of them, was like the sort of the flash and like just the raw, special effects power and an energetic crew. I could never deny that they had great chemistry as a crew. And I would go back and I would rewatch them, and I'd be like, how is it that I've rewatched them all, like, in the same year, and, like, one or two of them twice? And then I was like, maybe I kind of like them now. And so we'll get into it more, but I have come around on this movie in many ways.
And to me, all three of these movies are popcorn Trek. And that's not a bad thing. I like my popcorn. I know what I'm going to get with these movies. I don't watch them for the same reasons I would watch Duet or The Inner Light.
Right.
So, some of those episodes.
And like I was saying, like the Trek movies, after, I don't know, the motion picture, had almost already mostly settled into some stripe of action movies. They had a little more thematic resonance than I think Abrams and his successors would try for. I felt they were a little bit more ambitious, but they were still action movies. And so he kind of gave us like the most refined version of a modern action movie. They were kind of long in the tooth action movies by the end of them, and he kind of brought in a modern sensibility like in a huge way.
And also this movie does kind of circle back to the original series in some ways, and it has in a strange way kind of some more TOS-y vibes to things than the movies, as far as the color and the just being more melodramatic.
And
flashier. But that's kind of something that the TOS guys were going for back in the 60s.
Yeah, it definitely feels more like the TOS series than any of the other films. I mean, 5 kind of feels like a season 3 episode. But beyond that, I this feels like perhaps a lot like some sort of amped up, speed-induced version of old 60s Star Trek with, of course, amazing production values. I do sometimes feel it's really a Star Wars movie in Star Trek clothing, but it's undeniably a fun movie that you can't help but love and watch, and it's well executed for what it's trying to be.
Dave of 10 years ago absolutely agrees with that.
Yeah.
And Dave of 2019 somewhat agrees with it, but has a soft spot now.
Yeah.
Father, do we want to hit the summary?
Sure. So just in case you haven't seen this movie in a while, I will refresh all of you by going through our what speed do we do the transwarp for the movies? This is the transwarp speed summary.
Mr. Scott's going to beam it transwarp, beam it through warp directly to us.
Transwarp doesn't mean what we thought it meant anymore in this movie, because this movie makes weird choices like that I'm sure we'll nitpick as we go along.
Father, if you will, punch it.
We open things up with the Federation starship, USS Kelvin, investigating an anomaly in deep space. It looks like a lightning storm in space. But the investigation turns deadly when a massive, and I mean massive, mean-looking Romulan ship rolls up out of the storm. The ship is the Narada, and she's commanded by an insane, angry Romulan named Nero, who kills the Kelvin's captain and starts blowing up the ship. Lieutenant George Kirk takes command and single-handedly pilots the Kelvin, shooting down attacking torpedoes so that the rest of the ship can evacuate via shuttlecraft. One of the evacuees is George Kirk's pregnant wife, who goes into labor. James T. Kirk, the legend, is born in the middle of the battle. George misses the birth of his son, but gets the news he is born over the comm system. He tells Mrs. Kirk to name him Jim, and that he loves her, before heroically crashing into the Narada, halting the behemoth ship long enough for the shuttles to make their escape. Kid Kirk grows up back on Earth in Iowa, where he is a Grand Theft Auto committing brat. He hangs out in rural Iowa not doing much with his life, until he meets Starfleet officer Captain Pike one night after a drunken bar fight. Pike talks to Kirk about his father's sacrifice and encourages him to do something more with his life and join Starfleet. Kirk goes off to Starfleet Academy, where he hangs out with his new friend, Dr. McCoy, tries to get into Uhura's pants, and bangs an Orion classmate, as well as cheats on the infamous Kobayashi Maru test, the supposedly unbeatable Starfleet Command simulator. Just like the Kirk we know from Star Trek II, this younger version also doesn't believe in the no-win scenario. And cheating on this test really pisses off the guy who programmed it to be unwinnable, Commander Spock. Spock and Kirk's first meeting is interrupted because, oh no! Planet Vulcan is under attack. The cadets scramble to ships. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Uhura all end up on the Enterprise, with Captain Pike, Sulu, and Chekhov. They take off at warp to planet Vulcan, where there is a lightning storm in space. Kirk remembers this is the same type of scary, weird space thing that showed up when his father was killed on the Kelvin on the day of his birth. He warns the bridge crew, right before they arrive at Vulcan, where the rest of the rescue fleet has been destroyed by the Narada. Pike goes over to the Narada to negotiate with Nero, and leaves Spock in command with Kirk as the first officer. The Narada drills a hole into planet Vulcan and drops a weapon into the planet's core that creates a black hole. Spock, a resident of the planet, beams down to rescue his folks, Sarek and Amanda. Unfortunately, his mother Amanda doesn't make the transport back to the ship, and dies when the planet collapses in on itself. Planet Vulcan is destroyed. Kirk tells Spock the right course of reaction is to hunt Nero down. Spock wants to follow orders, though, and regroup with other Starfleet ships before taking any aggressive actions against Nero. The two get in a spat that ends with Spock marooning Kirk on the nearby ice planet Delta Vega. On this planet, Kirk has a surprise meeting with an older version of Spock, the Nimoy Spock who we all know and love. This Spock explains that he and the Narada are from the future. He says that Romulus, Nero's homeworld, was destroyed by a supernova. Spock was able to stop the nova by using red matter, some dumb contrived sci-fi red shit that creates black holes. Spock wasn't fast enough to save Romulus, though, and Nero has it out for him. But the black hole created by the red matter pulled in both the Narada and Spock's ship, sending them back in time. This created an alternate timeline starting with the arrival of the Narada that is different from the Prime timeline. Prime Spock says Nero needs to be stopped, and the way to do that is to get Kirk on the Enterprise and in the captain's chair. He tells young Kirk that the version of himself currently in command of the Enterprise is emotionally compromised after the destruction of planet Vulcan, and Kirk should use that to get command of the ship. Luckily, a certain Starfleet engineer named Montgomery Scott, aka Scotty, is also on Delta Vega, and he is able to beam himself as well as Kirk back to the Enterprise. Kirk easily pisses off Spock, getting him to show to everyone how unstable and compromised he currently is, and as the new acting captain of the Enterprise, orders the ship to go after the Narada, which is now preparing to destroy planet Earth. Kirk and Spock learn to work together when they beam over to the Narada, rescue Pike, and ignite the red matter. Scotty beams them back to the Enterprise, and the red matter begins to form a black hole. Kirk offers to save Nero and the crew of the now crippled Narada before they are destroyed by the black hole, but Nero is a stubborn asshole and turns down the act of compassion like a real dick. So Kirk tells Sulu to blow up those punk-ass Romulans and their ridiculously big ship, and with the Narada destroyed, the Enterprise just barely escapes the black hole. The crew return to Starfleet back on Earth. Young Commander Spock meets Spock Prime. Pike is an admiral now. And Tyler Perry hosts a big ceremony where he promotes Kirk from cadet to captain and gives him command of the Enterprise, with Spock as his first officer. With the familiar Enterprise crew now assembled on the iconic ship, they take off at warp to explore new worlds and new civilizations, and boldly go where no one has gone before. The end.
Surely no man at this point.
They say no one.
Oh, they do? Okay.
Yeah.
Got that.
I think that was a good retrofit. It was time.
They keep it woke.
Yep.
But when they did Enterprise, they went back to no man.
Did they?
Okay,
For
well...
continuity purposes, I guess.
Yes.
I agree with the no one thing.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it in the Kelvin verse. So, you said contrived for the red matter. Really?
I mean, it is super contrived. I mean, in the same... are you about to bring up proto-matter?
Well, no, I'm just going to say, yeah, it contrived implies that it does a bunch of stuff that it shouldn't, but they have a gimmick that creates black holes. Black holes have been associated with time travel since, the 1950s or 60s?
It's pretty convenient in all the things that it can do. It's both the time travel device and the weapon of mass destruction, and...
Black holes and time travel have always been like this in pop sci-fi. So.
I think because I knew that Abrams had a thing for weird red spheres, it showed up in Alias and I believe in some way in Lost, and he just kind of used them for whatever he needed to have happen. I think that's part of why it bugged me, but I think I was more bothered by the notion that a single supernova threatened the fate of the whole galaxy in the future, which is real dodgy.
That's contrived. I'll give you that. That's contrived.
Yes, and I don't mind the red matter as much as Dave does, but I knew that he hates it, so I threw that in there for him.
I appreciate it. Even now, though, like it is not a dagger in my heart as I watch it.
But yeah, like the idea of a nova that's going to threaten the entire galaxy kind of needs a bit more explaining, and that's a lot of stuff in this movie. Like with Nero's giant ship. Or there's a few other things here and there that I kind of wish they had taken the time to explain. There's always the comic book Star Trek Countdown, the kind of the prequel to this. But
that was a weirdly big seller at my comic shop that I manage when it came out, which was another sign to me. I was like, people are interested in Star Trek stuff? What is even happening?
Well, I don't actually read comics hardly at all, and I bought that one.
Yeah.
But,
it is kind of required reading for this movie, which I think is kind of a fault of the movie.
Yes.
You shouldn't need to do homework for movies.
The biggest thing it explains, aside from being a big last hurrah for Picard's crew, really, is it explains...
Well, until now.
Right. It explains why the Narada is the size of a Star Destroyer for a mining ship.
Why,
and like so advanced.
Why Nero is so familiar with Kirk and Spock in the Enterprise.
See, those bits I didn't need. There was stuff I loved how it explained Spock and Nero's relationship. That was essential reading, in my opinion.
As an aside, I think we should just say people should give it go read that if they are any stripe of fan of this movie.
Yes.
We don't talk about comics a lot anymore on TEX-TREK because not that many people seem to be into it. But if anyone does want to hear us talk about Star Trek Countdown, I would kind of like to, but only if people tell me that they want us to. So if you have any interest in that, let me know, or else we're probably not going to do it.
I am also in a podcast called the Sci Fidelity Podcast, and we did a commentary track to this movie. And one of the, mostly just hashing on it and ragging on it. But it was great fun. And one of the things we noticed is there is something in almost every scene that doesn't quite make sense or needs a little more explanation. In every scene of this movie. That became our running gag throughout our commentary track, was could we find a scene where we couldn't find something that didn't seem a little off or weird.
JJ kind of, as a filmmaker, he kind of rides on emotion and raw visuals.
Yes.
He's I think actually very talented at it.
Yes.
But he it's kind of like you gotta squint sometime. Can I quick say something right before you even get into the movie itself? Is I want to mention the music, which starts before the movie does. And Michael Giacchino, the composer who worked with him on Alias and Lost before, I think is owed a big debt for this movie because it does rely so much on sort of visuals, almost in the way like a silent movie does at times, the visuals, and on an operatic level when the music swells and stuff. I think he created a great new theme, but at the very least, it's kind of an interesting lead-in. It does suggest that there's something serious that's going to come. And then they do this kind of cool, almost artsy sort of thing where the camera is like panning around the Kelvin and like in a way where you only see glimpses of the lights or like brief detail of the saucer section. And you hear the familiar Trek sounds of like the bridge and all that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting kind of artsy lead into it. It's almost dreamlike for a split second.
I generally love the way that JJ photographs these starships. He makes them feel big and important, but it does get a little weird sometimes when he starts like turning the camera upside down and stuff. I'm just kind of like, why is the camera tilting like this?
For better
right
or worse,
now?
Discovery took a lot from that.
It does reinforce there's no up or down in space, and he's willing to play with that tool, which is a tool most other Star Trek directors have left on the shelf.
Yeah.
There's no up or down in space.
It visually delineates it.
We're going to turn Star Trek upside down.
Yeah, there you go. I was trying to find a good way to put it. So the opening sequence, I think almost everybody has to kind of be into, right?
Yeah, when I walked into this movie theater still very nervous, and I saw this opening sequence of the Kelvin and the death of George Kirk, and I was just like, so hooked. I was like, oh my god, that is so cool. Something that Dave pointed out when we talked about the first episode of DS9 Emissary was that DS9 kind of starts off in a very similar way with a similar space battle and a family member dying and someone else escaping on a shuttle. But
little Wolf 359 there.
But I think that they got this opening sequence so right, and if it didn't have this big emotional scene that hooks into your heart and your feelings, it makes you connect with the movie. I don't think these movies would be as well liked as they are.
I arguably the hook of this, because it is structured like a 60s episode with a hook and then the credits. The hook might be the best part of this movie.
It functions like a small movie on its own.
But it needs to be the best part.
Yes.
Absolutely. And what it does is everyone comes in with all their mental baggage and they just emotionally blow you away so that your brain gets switched off and you're just feeling, and then you just go with it out of the roller coaster after that. It's very clever, and it's something JJ is amazingly good at.
And Michael Giacchino's score contributes a lot to that as well. Yeah. And also Chris Hemsworth's performance.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and I always start tearing up when I'm watching this at the moment where the torpedoes are about to hit the shuttle that his wife is on, and like he's like shooting those down and saving her. That always makes me start crying.
You know what I love about that scene? When I was watching it today, I noticed that they like didn't overplay it like some big. The music was not super dramatic at that moment. There was one that's like right about to hit it, and it just gets like popped off. Yeah. And it's actually they handle it kind of quietly in that exact moment when it was like closest to happening. And he, I think Abrams kind of plays around with those tempos a little bit. So unlike Michael Bay, who's like everything has to be up to 11 all the time, I think Abrams has a sense of when to let a scene breathe a little bit. Like when Kirk's dad has a moment to talk to his wife, the movie lets him talk to her for a few minutes. It doesn't have to happen so quickly.
I noticed
it does.
It happens fairly quick, but...
Well, let me say something that's in direct reaction to that. Okay. The movie also does something that's the opposite of that when the captain of Robo... the captain of the ship, the guy who kidnapped Tony Stark.
Kelvin captain, yeah.
But yeah, when he gets killed, and then like George Kirk and everyone on the Kelvin bridge are reacting, and he starts like giving orders and stuff, and the camera actually cuts away from him mid-sentence. It's because... It's like, he doesn't have time to like talk about stuff. It's like here comes the action.
Right.
Here comes the torpedoes, the ship starts getting hit.
Yeah.
And so it does like like here he has like a moment to breathe and have an emotional bit. Yeah. And here's like another part where like the action just takes over.
There's moments that the characters have to talk to each other and they want the camera to get in close on them and have some scenes where the conversation back and forth a little bit.
Well, they do this weird sound thing where, like, they bring down almost all the sound effects to nothing during the birth sequence.
The music only the music, and sometimes not even the music.
And then you hear the baby cry, and somehow, despite all the explosions and everything, that's the only sound effect they let through, and everything else is pulled down to is not there at all except the music. And I thought that was an interesting touch, because really there should be all sorts of stuff screaming at George Kirk over the at that point.
I know there should be more to Kirk than just being like the space warrior that General Chang wanted to fight in Star Trek VI, but it is kind of cool to be born in this epic looking space battle.
Yeah. Yes.
And
a space battle that, by the way, look instead of the kind of relatively slow-moving ship battles of various Treks past, almost had the kind of immediacy of like the D-Day scene in Saving Private Ryan when all the phasers and everything cut loose and all of the Naradas, whatever those are hitting it, torpedoes.
They call them missiles sometimes, they call them torpedoes sometimes, I don't know. But
they
split up.
You follow that crew member getting sucked out the hole, spinning out and bouncing off the phaser.
I always thought, when I was a kid, I always thought it'd be cool to see something like that in Star Trek.
Yeah.
It certainly looked best in this, and it has something of that feel of what Wrath of Khan shook me up when I was a kid, of like seeing the consequences in a big way of a space battle. There's big explosions on the interior. You see kind of some wild camera things where it looks like people, explosions knock people like 30 feet, and it looks pretty intense.
And just to be like, what Dave will probably think is like a weird technical thing to even pay any attention to.
I'm already disgusted.
What Brian will probably like disagree with me on is I actually like the way that they use star dates in this movie, starting here where it's 2233.04, because I like. Finally, a star date that makes sense. It's just like the year and then like a decimal. And
I will say
I dug it.
Finally, on my latest reviewing of the movie, made my peace with that. I decided that in the future, they're not quite speaking English. They're speaking Anglish or something like the novels say. And that this is this is just a little more thoroughly translated than some of the other star dates.
But I also, I think star dates are stupid, and they don't really make sense in TOS and then like with the rest of Star Trek. And then if you try to watch the shows in that star date order, it doesn't make sense. And I just always
Actually, it works fine except for like 2 episodes, maybe 3.
Father, I'd just like to say your assessment of what I would think about it was correct.
But anyways,
let me quick throw this out. When I'm watching this opening scene, there is like the analytical, nerdy, pick the movies apart part of me that's like, there is like nothing more kind of emotionally manipulative than the scene where like this guy is trying to defend his newborn baby from a marauder, and he's gonna die nobly doing it. But again, it is so effective at what it does that if there's not like a tear on your cheek, I feel like there's something not quite right with you.
I will also say that I said it was sort of Star Wars in Star Trek clothing. It's not entirely that, because Kirk's mom does not die of sadness at the
because Star Wars is stupid and terrible 50% of the time. Go ahead and at me, I don't care. But yeah, let's move past the opening scene, and let's talk about Spock for a little bit, and the Vulcan bullies and kid Spock. I love that they take stuff from the best animated series episode Yesteryear.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was so surprised by that in the theater, because I'm like, oh my god, someone else watched that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the notion of Vulcan bullies is a little bit weird, but one of the things I love about those scenes showing young Spock is when his father articulates something that the audience might not really know if they're not Trekkies, which is that he's like, Vulcans not only do they feel emotions, he says we may feel them more intensely than most humans.
Yes.
And
that's very, very like DC Fontana, old school.
Yeah. But explaining that essentially what they do is they live a super rigid philosophy where they try and curb that, and that they really believe that that's the best way to live. But yeah, they experience emotions, and they're going to put Spock through a ringer later in the movie, so it's important to know that.
Sarek also uses a line from Yesteryear where he says that logic offers a serenity that humans seldom experience. Which is something that adult Spock tells kid Spock in Yesteryear.
It's a great line, and I did want to mention, for a movie that has a lot of sort of pop dialogue, some of it's kind of doofus jokes and stuff like that. There are a few lines in here that have stayed with me. Obviously, like when the guy when Pike tells Kirk, your father was a captain of a starship for 12 minutes, that whole sequence, some very memorable lines. They are scattered throughout the whole movie.
I have to say, as far as dialogue, this is really well written. I mean, it's loads of quotable moments. Some of them are jokes, and maybe you think there are too many jokes, but it is loads of quotable stuff.
The plot stuff's a little loosey-goosey, but
I think
the dialogue works.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking of, and like some of the technical stuff, like we've always talked about, I don't need tons of technobabble, but a little bare minimum, I kind of would prefer that they do.
The style of storytelling that J.J. Abrams uses, like we mentioned, it is very effective on the emotional level. As far as like having like a clear and solid plot, that's where it's a little wibbly wobbly. But if you can enjoy the ride if you hook into the emotional stuff.
Totally. And I think you owe it to yourself, and maybe even the movie, to do that. It's you're just gonna end up like having a terrible experience if you're going to fight it all the time.
I think Star Wars also appeals to emotion more than intellect, and I think that's what JJ likes to do. That's the movie. All of JJ's movies that I've seen have been emotion based, much more than intellect based.
Did you? I didn't. Young Kirk is almost too much of a jerk for me. I wanted to smack him down.
So that was one of the problems that I watched this movie with the commentary track again, and they said it was one of the problems that they had is that they thought Kirk was a little unlikable, and they had to cut some stuff to try to make him a little bit more.
Am I right that essentially the core difference in his world and the world of most of the people we know is simply that he grew up without the guiding hand of a father?
He grew up with some sort of father, just not his birth.
A guy who said he was going to whoop his ass for stealing his car.
Which seems fair.
Yeah, but you got the vibe that this guy might not be a great dad.
So unfortunately, I recognized the voice, and I'd seen him in Heroes, and I loved him in Heroes, so I was like, Greg Gunberg can't be a bad dad.
That's who Greg Grunberg was?
Yes.
I know Abrams always uses him.
Yes, and I was like,
forgot that.
So all my love for that actor was like clouding he's clearly supposed to be an abusive dad, and that was one of the things that does rub me the wrong way. That feels like we're going against Roddenberry a little bit here.
We all do stuff we shouldn't do as kids.
I do think it's like...
it's some pretty extreme stuff.
Yeah, but he didn't hurt anyone, per se. It's property damage. I think we're supposed to see what made Kirk be in the wrong. Like, a little bit that his life simply hasn't been kind of as... what's privileged is almost the word I'm looking for, as it was when he had a supportive, kind of noble father. But I do think they wanted him to, simply put, be more of a loose cannon, a little more Kirk than Kirk. And that allowed them to play up to the stereotype that the average person knows, which is kind of won out in the pop culture over the actual show itself.
Yeah, well, I mean, the original Kirk was described as being a bookworm at the Academy.
Right.
This is not this Kirk, so what changed?
I mean, he could be. He could still be a bookworm. We don't actually see him when he's hitting the books.
When he talks to her, he impresses her by knowing what, like, xenolinguistics is. And it is clear, I think it's supposed to be he's probably one of those people who's casually smart, who doesn't apply himself, and Pike has to come along and be that second father figure and kick his ass and make him apply himself.
So the bar sequence in Iowa, I really dig that, because that, to me, like, that bar, it looks like something that could exist in the time period and with the aesthetic of the original series. It's colorful. People have a bunch of, like, retro hairdos, and
it looked unlike, say, not to pick on Next Gen, but like the sedate 10-forward lounge style.
No, this was much more happening.
Yeah. Right, it looked like... I feel like one of my favorite scenes in Star Trek Discovery, which was the big party that they throw in the Harry Mudd episode, owes this scene something for allowing Trek's utopian future to have a little bit of fun in the style of a modern day partying. Loud party, yeah.
Yeah, I would go drink at that bar.
Yeah.
I've actually been to Riverside, Iowa, and they should establish this bar somewhere up there.
That scene also contains some really terrible, like the start of some of their dumbest gags. A kind of a dopey interface with the big guy who's like calls him Cupcake. Well, here's the thing. Like, had this been made in the 80s or 70s, I kind of feel like that would have been typical of, like, Trek's sense of humor. It had a broad sense of humor in those old episodes. Like, the fight scene in Trouble with Tribbles has a lot of visual humor in it. It's just that they were gonna... Uhura is a character that, is somewhat famously didn't get as much to do as we really would have liked for her to have. And to kind of reduce her to a bit of a sex object, even though Kirk was clearly the creep here, and make her, like, the subject of a sex joke.
Yeah,
it just kind of rubs me the wrong way.
I don't like the way that they treat Uhura in the movie with some of that type of stuff.
See, overall, I thought I was glad that they took Uhura and made her basically the third most important good guy in the story. Yeah. And I liked that, or maybe fourth. But I also thought the scene was well done in that it shows Kirk is very flawed, but it also manages to give you enough to show you that there's a diamond in the rough there. You can, in that course of that bar sequence, see that there is something much more to Kirk, even before Pike starts going on about there's something more to you.
And I like him being the cocky smartass when he gets in a fight with the character we know from the comics is named Hindorf, but the guy who Kirk calls Cupcake, and what did he tell him? Maybe you can't count, but there's 4 of us and only one of you. Yeah. And he says, so get some more guys and it'll be a fair fight. And then they kick his ass.
But he does pretty good against 5 or 4 people. He does not go down like a punk.
It fits the guy who felt like he should be able to beat the Kobayashi Maru, and it thematically ties into much of what we know about Kirk.
And it also sets up the recurring trope in this movie of Kirk getting beat up a lot, which is kind of...
Throughout the whole thing, every character takes some facial hits, whether, it's after Nero blows shit up or Spock beams down to try and save his parents. JJ likes to show his characters get roughed up.
Which was the ththing in the original series. There were fist fights all the time.
Yes. Yeah, I always bring that up whenever someone says that this movie has too much action. I mean, like, it does have... it is very action heavy, but TOS was very action heavy.
It would have been more if they could have afforded it.
Yeah, if they could have had anywhere near like this level of choreography or spectacle or stunts, they would have done all of this back in the 60s, I promise.
Yes.
What do y'all think about Bruce Greenwood's Captain Pike, who we get to meet in this sequence after the bar fight?
A few years ago, I would have considered him one of the best Captain Pikes. But,
thanks a lot, Anson Mount, for ruining Bruce Greenwood's Pike.
I might still like Greenwood better. He doesn't have much screen time to prove himself, but he's so instantly like got the right stuff kind of guy.
Yeah.
That when he says, it kind of commands you to listen. I almost feel like the movie turns into like a recruitment movie at that point when he's given his speech, because I'm like, I'm ready to go sign up for the military
when
right
he
now.
says there's more to you than this disaster, you believe him. You believe this guy.
And it's not just that scene. It's like when they're about to take off, and there's a little bit of humor because Sulu forgot to basically take off the brakes or whatever. He doesn't. He gives him like a little smile or whatever. And, but he doesn't, like, hold his feet to the fire, and then he's like, you got it covered? All right, let's punch it.
I don't think he has near the warmth that Anson Mount has.
I don't know if that's true. The movie
that
didn't
scene
give him...
is not a scene where you want to deploy the warmth. You want to slap, shock Kirk into...
I think that he was showing warmth, though, when he said he's like... the fact that he chose Kirk to try and, like... As like, sort of a project that he wants to try and help him... I don't think he's... I mean, maybe he is. He does kind of talk like he's just doing it for Starfleet. But I think he wanted to help Kirk.
Now, it bothers me here that he tells him that... He describes Starfleet as a peacekeeping armada. As like... They don't say the word explore at all in this movie.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I hate about it.
He did lean a little into the militaristic stuff.
This whole movie does.
When they're at Starfleet, it feels that way a bit more.
Like the caps that they wear with their uniforms.
Yeah.
I don't like
visually
that.
really bugged me when I first saw it.
There was a very similar cap in Pike's quarters in the cage.
Yeah, but I'm glad that was like just a glimpse.
Yeah, that
True.
was like before they didn't even know it was called Starfleet back then.
Yeah.
They call it like an Earth ship. And anyways,
shortly after that, we will get to his first meeting with McCoy, which I think is kind of hokey, even though I really love that actor in the role.
So I loved it.
Larry Nemeczek has a great description of this, Dr. Trek, if you don't know what I'm talking about, but he kind of talks about this as continuity whiplash, because when Dr. McCoy says that the wife took the whole damn planet in the divorce, it's like, oh, we finally have the divorce on screen. That's canonical now. Finally, after all these years, yay! But then after that, he says, all I got left is my bones. And then it's like back, because it's like, no, that's not why your nickname is Bones. It's because you're a doctor. And back in the Civil War, they called doctors Sawbones.
Yeah.
Well, nothing in the movie rules out the Sawbones thing explicitly. Kirk never says, the reason I call him Bones is this and not this.
Well, that's one of the nice things about the Kelvin timeline, being its own thing and being this departure, is that if there's stuff in here that you like that fits in the prime timeline, you can kind of fit it in there if it fits. And if you don't like it, you don't have to go with it.
Yeah.
Like the idea of like Spock programming the Kobayashi Maru. Like, what is that? Did he invent the Kobayashi Maru? Is that why he never took it? And they're at the con, he said he never took it. But they also say in this movie is like, he's been programming it for the last 4 years. So maybe he's just like the guy they brought in to make it extra hard or something.
I like to think that he invented it, but...
I have to quick say...
Because they keep describing it as your test.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I love that idea. Spock made the Kobayashi Maru. Awesome.
I'm not a fan. It's a little too, like, I don't want all my favorite characters to all have, like, a finger in every main big thing in Star Trek. But it's a low-level quibble. I did think that when they showed the Kobayashi Maru, it was kind of a letdown. Like, I wanted it to have a certain intensity. McCoy talked about it like it, nobody takes that twice, Jim. And then when he does it, obviously he's supposed to be cocksure because of his reprogramming thing, but it didn't look very intense to me, and like I kind of wanted it to be more of a thing.
The thing that bothers me with the Kobayashi Maru is you don't really see Kirk doing anything special to beat it. Like, it kind of just... The movie kind of...
like he was literally just trolling Starfleet.
Well, yeah, like it implies that like he might have like hacked into it and like deleted a line of code here or there and just made it winnable, where it just he put it on easy mode basically, where the shields go down, you can just shoot all the Klingons with your torpedoes.
I think I always would have liked for him to have like been doing something that like almost like the way he would have beat robots back in the day. He was pushing the rules so hard like the physics couldn't keep up with him or something.
There's a deleted scene that I wish they left in here. I understand why they took it out. But right before the Kobayashi Maru test, we see him in bed with the Orion girl, Gayla, I believe is her name.
That sounds right. Uhura's roommate.
And yes, Uhura's roommate. And the original idea was that he was just sleeping with her because he needed her to be at the right place at the right time. And he told her, okay, like tomorrow when I'm taking the test, don't ask me why, but like I need you to like open this message that I'm sending you from like this one specific place, like this one specific computer terminal. and you'll understand then. She's like, okay. And so, like, she does that, and when she opens the message, it's like she gets, like, an email from Kirk, and, like, she, like, opens the attachment, and then, like, it, like, hacks into the Starfleet computer, and that's how he got in to beat the thing. But part of why they took that out is because they thought that Kirk did come off as a little too unlikable, and they thought that that would be kind of scummy if he was just sleeping with her to use her to beat the thing.
I agree.
And I can see that too, but I do wish that there was something like that still in the movie. I'll say this about, like, that scene where he's in bed with her is, like, she's really hot, but it is weird when we have Uhura come in and then, like, she strips down to her underwear also, and that feels like a little forced and juvenile.
You know what's interesting is, like, they definitely, like, there's a little Star Trek always had some sexy going on it. Those many shirts weren't out of nowhere.
But they didn't have people just, like, strip down to their underwear.
Yeah. there was a lot of, like, silver bikinis and stuff in that in the 60s. That's pretty close.
I have to admit, I'm pretty sure Roddenberry absolutely would have done that in this movie
without a doubt.
if he could. So, in the 60s.
But you know what I will say? Most of the people I know who don't like that are kind of my, like, nerdy Trekkie fans. I think the average viewer that kind of pushed this movie into mega sales thought it was funny and sexy.
Well, I forgive it, and this is actually one of my favorite moments in the movie, because, you know, I told you I was, like, really hooked after the opening scene, and then, you know, as the movie got on, I was like, okay, is this going to lose me? This is a little weird here and there, but then when we get to here, and Uhura's describing the transmission that she got about how the ship destroyed 47 Klingon ships, and I was like, oh my god, they said 47. I am so on board. I hope this franchise makes 12 movies. I'm on board for every one of them.
This podcast is over. You know what I did notice, by the way, about that? Well, I have two comments to springboard off that and quickly get away from your obsession. One is that did Nero? They say he destroys those ships, and that was like where they were exploring the Klingon system on the Kelvin, right? Did he just hang out in Klingon's border space for 25 years?
Another deleted scene, he was captured, taken to Rura Penthe, and was a prisoner there, and then he escaped conveniently before Spock shows up with the red matter that he can use to...
Well, they kind of decide it's time, let's go escape now. Which means, like, really? You just hung out in a prison you could have escaped 10 years ago?
I'd read a comic about that.
There is one. It's called Star Trek Nero, and it's about what he was doing... during this time period.
I thought I had read all the prequel stuff. I forgot that one existed. I need to read that.
Well, it's kind of an in-between cool because it's after the opening scene, but it takes place in that 25-year jump.
I think that's actually a decent enough plot point. It's definitely, the movie doesn't need it, but that's kind of cool.
I have to admit, my headcanon is that he went off to Romulus for 20 years and taught the Romulans how to save themselves from this exploding star, and here's a bunch of cool super weapons. So, and then, I gotta go, my 20 years is up. So...
You would think he'd be like a little less unhinged if that was the case.
Yeah, later on he says his got one goal, which is to destroy Vulcan and make Spock sad, and the other goal is to wreck Starfleet.
Well,
that
maybe
his
Nero sat around brooding for 20 years, but his crew went off to Romulus and tipped them off.
He's an expert brooder. There's a whole lot of this going on.
Look, we brought you the captain of the Kelvin. I'm busy brooding. You interrogate him.
He doesn't speak at all during that. And I kind of feel like Eric Bana, who I think he's a capable actor. Maybe he's a little hit and miss. I don't know. I can't really think of anything I love that he's like the lead man in, but I've seen him be good in a bunch of stuff. I feel like the script didn't give him much to work with, so he's like, okay, I'm just going to be like over the top when I can and just have fun with this character.
I think he did a good job with the material. I do agree he's like a somewhat lesser light in the Star Trek villainy. But I like watching him choose some scenery and brood and then leap out with a spear suddenly. That's fun.
Like I mentioned with the last movie, Star Trek Nemesis, I said, okay, going forward, every villain is a Khan ripoff.
Yeah.
One of them actually literally being Khan. But
all vengeance-based madmen.
They're all a guy who's mad about one specific thing from the past, and they're on a quest for revenge.
Yeah.
And
it's true.
It feels derivative, and this is...
But there's a big difference. He's a blue-collar, revenge-obsessed guy.
That's true.
It's the only blue-collar villain.
With his ridiculous monster mining ship. But
the other thing I wanted to
Have
mention
you seen how big asteroids can be? You need a big ship to mine big rocks.
yeah, it's just
I'm sure that's what they wanted you to think.
It is distracting that the ship looks so like scary and aggressive and
Like
mean.
a Lovecraft ship.
Yeah, it's like if Cthulhu was a spaceship, he would be the Narada.
It's got a bunch of arms to grab and pull the asteroids about.
I get that there's practical explanations for the design, but the aesthetic has such a psychological impact of being something that's just like over the top monstrous.
Yeah, it looks like an alien from Aliens became a ship.
Yeah, it
too.
looks like a xenomorph impregnated a Star
Destroyer.
Destroyer, and this is what bursted out.
Yeah. I think we've pinned it down, but that's the aspect.
I like your version better.
Now, I want to say, one of the things about Uhura doing that is that I feel like, and I can jump forward with this, all the core crew members who, in the original series, really until the movies, they had little episodes that were their sort of moments to shine, but they didn't feel like family, and they didn't feel like they were lead characters. But this one, just right out of the gate, everybody gets cool scenes. Chekhov is the whiz kid. Sulu is an expert pilot.
Even though he left the parking brake on. But he saved the ship by doing that.
And he's also a badass, fencer right out of the gate.
Yeah, because that was one of the memorable things from the original series was, as the Plinkett review for this movie describes it, one time Sulu got drunk and ran around with a sword. So here they make him like a really cool sword fighter. And it is kind of silly to do that with a Starfleet officer, but it works for this story.
Right. It gave everybody a hook, sort of. And Uhura is super badass with her tech, and also an expert at linguistics. She knows all the 3 dialects of Vulcan, or Romulan, and I like that gets going quickly. All those characters, even though they sometimes only get a few moments, but they're pretty big. Chekhov, is the one who gets them off the Vulcan when it's collapsing. It's not his fault that he didn't get Spock's mom. That was the planet. But he also saved Kirk. And
he had just done another badass transporter job, saving Kirk and Sulu, and let's talk about the Vulcan crisis and how
you're just going to move past Numtung.
And we can bring that up.
Let's just all bow our heads for a moment.
Yeah, I have to admit, dumbest part of the movie is the whole Kirk is infected with this thing that causes whatever stupid symptom the scriptwriter can think of.
I like McCoy infecting Kirk as a way to do him a favor and get him on board the Enterprise.
The basic idea is sound.
They milk that tit for way too long, and the milk ain't that good.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. I couldn't put it better. That's probably my least favorite. As far as every time I see it, the part that still gets worse rather than better is that.
But I do love that beauty shot of the Enterprise when they go to board the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And I forgot about this till I rewatched the commentary.
About the first big shot of it?
Yes.
Yeah. It is almost like the anti-Star Trek the Motion Picture in that it it looks so good in kind of that one split second.
But it's not a split second. They draw it out for
it's only 5 or 10 seconds.
But you get several different shots of it. Yeah, you can you can follow the process of here's the shuttle is here at the front of the saucer, then here it comes over here between the pylons, and now here it's in the aft section going into the shuttle bay. And to me,
it's a JJ slow moment.
It does the motion picture long tracking shot. I know Brian's going to slap me when I finish the sentence, but it does that better than Robert Wise did.
Now, the disadvantage it has is that its Enterprise looks like a 60s hot rod of curves and is nowhere near as cool as the motion picture ship.
Hot rod Enterprise, why not?
So we'll call this the Kelvin prize, because now we have the Disco prize and the Kelvin prize.
Yeah. But I actually did feel that over time that the Constitution class seemed a little small compared to the Picard's Enterprise and stuff.
I disagree. I love the size of the Connie, and my biggest issue with the ship is how they made it so gigantic.
I just ignore that. In my head, it's only a little bit bigger than the Prime Universe Connie.
It was going to be smaller, but then they upscaled it because JJ wanted to use this giant interior set for the shuttle bay.
Interestingly, most of those are the only shots I overtly dislike is all the industrial stuff inside.
The Budweiser brewery stuff.
The brewery stuff. I like how the bridge looks. I like the Apple Store look that people joked about. Well, we should probably mention the lens flare at some point, but for its vividly bright future, that it was mostly portraying a pretty optimistic future, it almost works thematically.
It does bug me that not shuttlecraft, that turbo lift takes 1.5 seconds to go from the shuttle bay to the bridge, and we actually follow Spock go from the shuttle bay to the turbo lift to the bridge, and it's just like bam, bam. And I'm like, how the hell did you get through the ship that fast?
But it looks cool. Like it's neat to see it all in one tracking shot where to get into a turbo lift.
I think that to make them cool, I can see why the turbo lifts need to be super fast. And I do compare it to the old 60s Star Trek where Spock is on the bridge and he gets into the turbo lift and tells the turbo lift to go to deck 2 and then has a 5-minute conversation with the person in the turbo lift.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know what part of deck 2 he was going to.
It's right under the bridge. Deck 2 is tiny.
Oh yeah, deck 2 is small.
Yeah.
It was the portion of deck 2 that's actually outside the ship by about 5 miles.
But I mean, this is a different ship than the one in the original series. This was built later in a different timeline, and maybe it has like, if you need to get first officer to the bridge super fast because there's a crisis going on, it has like a super turbo lift speed.
I think there's something in there where like you don't feel like it cancels out what do you call it, centrifugal force or something like that, so that you don't feel it.
The turbo lifts obviously have to have inertia.
They must be doing something cool like that.
Yeah.
So, I of course am not particularly bugged by the ship being that much bigger, and you know that like the weird notion that like, oh, the death of Kirk's father somehow triggered bigger ships. Whatever. Obviously, it was an aesthetic choice.
Yeah.
And overall, I actually love most of how they filmed the ship. It looks so fast when it's going in warp.
Oh, I love
like
the warp
camera
jumps.
It's like the camera can't keep up with it. It's cool.
I did like JJ found a way to film big ships that is not Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yes.
Star Wars big ships work like Star Trek big ships.
Yeah, they still lumber.
Big, ponderous, moving across. Yeah. JJ shows us that these ships have some amazing, 1,000 G impulse drives, and accelerate like they're described in the tech manuals, but never seen on screen. And I did like that they managed to make the ships both look big and look fast at the same time, which I would have bet was impossible to do both, and JJ did it, so hats off to him.
And the special effects on the ships are so good. When I saw this, I was so impressed with it. I thought this was like the best CGI ships I'd ever seen in any movie in 2009, and it's still up there pretty high now, 10 years later.
Yeah, I agree.
When they arrive at Vulcan, you see all the ship debris everywhere.
I like that scene because it's like, it's super intense, and it has a little bit of that Saving Private Ryan D-Day feel, even though it's not like they're being shot at initially, but there's just so much debris and wreckage, and the camera moves around. It'll show some long shots of the ship while it's like doing its little spiral maneuver,
and you don't feel like it's like zipping around like a jet fighter. It has to like dive under to go under the debris. It feels like a massive ship.
Clearly, some debris hits it, like small debris and like at least one big debris.
And you see it like scrape off the plating on the nacelles. It looks so cool. Kirk hears it's a lightning storm in space, and he runs to the bridge to warn everyone because he knows what that means. I hate that they call it a lightning storm in space instead of some type of like anti-proton anomaly or some techno-babbly stuff. Like lightning storm in space sounds like that. There's a variety of things in Star Trek that could be a lightning storm, I'm sure.
That was for the rubes in the audience.
It does work within context. They say in the aboard the USS Kelvin, it looks like it looks like a lightning storm in space. That's impossible. I know, that's why we're calling you.
Yeah.
So, they're describing
They did seem to have
visually.
some awareness of it, and I think they wanted something iconic sounding.
Yeah.
To be fair, if you don't know what it is, then just using a colloquialism to describe the baseline visuals makes a certain amount of sense.
Yeah. I remember what I was going to say about the debris and the D-Day Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
It gives you this huge feeling that the situation is slipping out of control.
Right.
The chaos
the stakes feel real.
The chaos is overwhelming the entire world, both when they drop out of warp, both when the stuff with the Kelvin attack.
All right.
And JJ is very good at that.
He's taken out every other ship, and they if they had not stopped if they had gone any further and arrived when they did, they would be gone too.
Yeah, but just sailing through that, you realize the situation is totally out of control.
Yeah,
and that's what you feel as opposed to think.
Well, and also
they do a very good job with that.
When Nero gets the drop on him, he literally recreates the opening sequence where he's like, "Bring your captain aboard."
Well, first he says, Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
Which I love.
Yeah.
He's so blue collar. Just, I'm not all this
But he's like smarmy, too.
Back on Earth, I was a prince. Hey, Christopher.
What's up, Chris?
I was
Disco Boy Nero rolling up on the Narada.
it was just nice to
There
have
is
this
something-
non-pretentious,
On a certain level, it's ridiculous. On another level, it absolutely fits what the movie does everywhere else. Which is to subvert your expectations and have a somewhat more pop approach to things.
It's weird to me because it's kind of jarring from every other scene with Nero where he's just shouting at the top of his lungs. But okay, I've already accepted that this movie's not going to have like a super well designed, thought out villain, a real enticing villain that.
He is really well thought out. They just left all those thoughts in the comic book and not in the movie.
Yeah. So, but moving past that, we have like the orbital jump, the skydiving sequence, which has the big red shirt joke in there.
Yeah.
And when I watched this for the first time,
I actually didn't get it.
I was hoping. I was like,
I'm a dum-dum.
I was like, oh my god, this guy is in red. I wonder, wouldn't it be really funny if they kill him now? And I liked it the first time.
Yeah.
But now when I'm watching it, it's like, this guy is so ridiculous and overzealous.
Gonna go kick some Romulan ass.
Yeah, okay.
I think it was for the casual viewers that had an awareness of the red shirt trope.
Yeah.
And it gave them a moment to kind of feel like a Trekkie who was in the know.
Yeah.
And I don't want to begrudge them a little bit of surface Trek humor. It's relatively minor.
Yeah.
His
And
death is pointless, too, because they still successfully drill the hole and drop in the weapon.
yeah.
Well, the whole mission is kind of pointless. I guess they destroy it so they can use the transporter and communications, but then they
That's
don't
true.
really call anybody,
But they
and they
wouldn't-
only need the transporter. I guess they couldn't have saved
think
the
if
old
they-
Vulcans.
Well, they probably
If
would
they
have
had
pulled
done
the
it-
drill up.
If they had done it faster before the drill had finished its thing, if they had just been faster, basically, then he wouldn't have been able to drop the red matter in.
Yeah.
And I love that they use Vasquez Rock for a location in Vulcan. Vasquez Rock being the location that they used on many Star Trek shows. I don't think all of them, but going all the way back to season 1 of the original series, famously where Kirk fought the Gorn at Cestus 3 in Arena. And they used that same shooting location here, and we also saw that in the Picard trailer, so we know they're using Vasquez Rock again in Star Trek Picard, but that's where Spock beams down to save his family, and this is where Amanda dies.
Yep. Which, by the way, stunt casting wise, that was a bit of a surprise because they had gone and cast Winona Ryder,
Big name actress.
So they got a big name actress, and then they kill her off.
Yeah.
You know what?
And they put her in old age makeup for reasons that are not entirely clear in the final cut of the film.
You know, I generally don't like characters to just get killed off sort of for dramatic value, named characters. But I think it was pretty effectively done. And I actually liked how aside from good special effects on the destruction and all that stuff, that they acknowledged that there were at least Spock estimates like 10,000 surviving Vulcans. So they kind of are a little bit realistic about it. That there's presumably colonists and other people who might have gotten saved. But he does very poignantly say he's now a member of an endangered species, which I thought was a good line. It kind of very concisely sums up his place now.
Yeah.
I'm a big sucker for mother and son stories. Just from being real close to my mom, and even she died a few years ago, but even like before that, I was always like, that was just like an easy way to tug on my heartstrings and get me invested in a story. Mm-hmm. So that was a big like tearjerker moment for me, is like when he watches his mom die in front of him.
Well, also like when they arrive, when everybody else is transported into the transporter room, there's just silence in there. Everybody kind of understands what happened, but nobody, I think, says anything.
Yeah, they slow down and they hang on the moment.
It's one of those JJ slowdown moments.
Yeah. No, I liked it. I will say that is one of the scenes that, now having seen season 1 and 2 of Discovery, and the fact that something probably very similar to that happened in the Kelvin universe. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of what they state in this
movie. The Kelvin universe or in the Prime universe?
It probably happened in the Kelvin universe too. Why wouldn't it? So,
wait, what scene are you talking about then?
The idea that just a few months ago, Spock lost his sister.
Oh, right.
And now he just lost his mother and his home planet. I'm like, this is the worst year for Spock ever.
Yeah, I try to keep like the Discovery stuff separate,
But this movie explicitly says time likes to do that kind of stuff. Time wants you. If there's a message to the film, it's that time will put you and Spock and McCoy and Sulu and everyone back on a new version of the ship to fix things as quick as possible.
I don't like that either being in Star Trek. I don't like time having like its.
I don't like the message, but it's clearly the message.
I feel like the movie that was stated more clearly in a deleted scene with Leonard Nimoy. Yeah. I think in like the final cut of the movie, it's not conveyed.
It's the only way to make any sense of what happens is that there's... to make any sense of the mirror universe as well, is that time has some sort of force that pushes these people into these events.
Let's just say that Q was doing it.
Okay, well, Q is pushing people.
I don't like to poke too much at the mirror universe because it's such a fun contrivance to me. Now, but I do, speaking of contrivances, let's talk about Leonard Nimoy's appearance and Scotty's arrival and how Delta Vega is within visual sight of Vulcan, but they had been in warp and had left Vulcan.
No, they hadn't gone to warp.
Oh, were they not? Were they still at Impulse?
So my explanation is that
like a moon or something.
Yeah. Well, we know Vulcan has no moons.
Okay,
but we see nearby planets in the motion picture in the theatrical cut. Yeah. So I think that's just like Delta Vega and Delta Vega's moon, and kind of like how Romulus and Remus are kind of like twin planets. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is a cool like little Romulan-Vulcan connection. Maybe like Delta Vega and Vulcan are like twin planets, and one of them's really cold, and the other one's really hot, and I don't know, that kind of works.
Yeah. Sure. Let's roll with it. But it sure is a lucky coincidence that Kirk gets ejected from the ship, which is a crazy thing for Spock to do, but dramatic.
He's just so pissed off, and he just had like a really bad day.
Well, I'm sure Nero wanted old Spock to live with the pain. Yeah. So he doesn't want Spock to just die on the ice planet, so he puts him down near the Starfleet base, figuring that eventually he'll go to the base and and get rescued.
And you could argue that
continue to live with the pain of losing Vulcan.
Spock wasn't going to send him off to a planet that was like some barren death trap. He sent him to something where there was at least a place he could get to.
Yes, so they both sent him near the outpost for the same reason.
So it's a little reasonable.
Spock would have been an asshole if one of those snow monsters ate Chris Pine and...
The probe tells him he will be rescued from the station. Stay in the pod. Yeah. And Kirk, being Kirk, ignores it and goes out and gets attacked by monsters.
So Spock's hands are clean.
We need to talk about Zachary Quinto.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. He's great.
Breakout star, the best. Is he the best kind of the cast?
I kind of like. I'm partial to Carl Urban, but he doesn't get as much to do.
Yeah.
And McCoy is more one note. He doesn't have the range.
Getting Spock right and making him because they had to do a few new things with this. Like they introduced maybe we'll talk about this in a minute. The romance with Uhura. And they wanted to, I think, in some ways, take the Spock that had kind of become part of fandom, that had fan fiction written about him, and acknowledge a sexy Spock.
Oh, I don't know if that was a big priority for the. I think.
Why do you think they did?
I don't know. I mean, because they needed someone to have a love interest, and they wanted to be like a little. I mean, originally they were going to put Carol Marcus in here, give Kirk someone to lust after, but I like that they went like a little bit more subversive, and they had him actually like. Trying to get Uhura and then kind of surprises you that she's with Spock.
Yeah.
But I am not a fan at all of the Spock-Uhura relationship.
No, I think it's great.
I'm with Brian.
Fine with it.
You know what? As I was watching it this time, I was like, well, of course, it also mirrors his father's relationship with a human.
Yeah, and Zachary Quinto comes in with probably just about one of the hardest acting jobs in the history of humanity. He has to play the new version of a dearly beloved character.
The most iconic Star Trek character.
Who is hyper associated with Leonard Nimoy's unique, specific, brilliant performance.
Right.
And he's got to do it while Leonard Nimoy's in the frickin' movie to be compared to.
The screen with him.
And then the movie doesn't make it easy for him. They give him a whole range of stuff he has to do, and he has to feel like Leonard Nimoy in all of it, or at least reasonably close.
And it's a character who is not supposed to show emotion.
Yes, and it's a character who's hard to play even by itself, separate from everything else. And he nails it. Zachary Quinto's amazing. He's not Leonard Nimoy, but he's pretty frickin' close.
Yeah. It's hard to, in a way, he couldn't be Leonard Nimoy because Leonard Nimoy had the opportunity to build a character from scratch, and he's doing an imitation character. It sounds harsh, but he's kind of doing an imitation character. He's doing it so well, though, that he kind of managed to do that thing where he kind of makes it his own for purposes of the Kelvin movies, while at the same time really feeling like he's honoring what came before.
Yes.
From the quirk of the eyebrow to allowing some of that humor to come out, you know, to the dry sarcasm. When he tells the guys live long and prosper, and he's clearly saying "fuck you" to the Vulcan council or whatever.
And I'm sure it helped having Leonard Nimoy there to advise him.
Yeah, and Quinto's said that.
Yes, and Karl Urban does do amazing as McCoy. It's just McCoy's a little easier to do. No offense to Karl Urban, it's just
I agree.
Yeah,
he's growly.
Yeah,
even when I was like thinking Trek is dead from this movie, there was no way I could deny how likable and fun the cast were, how well cast they were.
Yeah.
I don't think there's actually a single one of them I would change, maybe excepting Scotty. Something didn't quite... He felt like the least similar to me in some ways.
Yeah.
So you like Pine as Kirk, then?
Yeah, I do, absolutely.
Well, because the point is he's not grown into the Kirk, so it's a plot point.
Well, that's the arc of the movie.
Yeah.
But,
whereas Scotty doesn't quite feel like the old Scotty. He's fun and lovable, and you like him, but he's not. He's probably the farthest off base.
He was a little bit of a serious guy on the show. He would you got the impression he could go and party down with some drinks, but he was actually kind of a serious dude.
Yeah,
but he could get really colorful sometimes.
Yeah. He was mischievous with the tribbles.
They lean into that like more like colorful and what's the word I'm looking for? But like the high energy excited Scotty,
right?
When
it's like they took the Scotty that was like that started the bar fight in Trouble with Tribbles and beamed the Tribbles over. Maybe the Scotty that also was a murderer.
The Wolf in the Fold.
Wolf in the Fold.
See Simon Pegg as murderous.
I'm just kidding. And here's the thing: he is fun in the role. Yeah, even the sort of ridiculous addition of his sidekick. Keenzer.
No, Keenzer.
I love Keenzer.
Keenzer, I don't like. Me and Dave established a while ago that he is the Jar Jar of Star Trek.
But I like him better than Jar Jar.
Keenzer's
great. It's because Star Trek is better than Star Wars.
All right, well,
and also Keenzer A is funny, unlike Jar Jar, and B they only use him in a couple of scenes. So you don't get sick of him, unlike Jar Jar.
Yeah.
So.
But now this is where we have like the transwarp beaming. Which, this is not what transwarp means, but I guess they've kind of, like, redefined transwarp before on the shows compared to Star Trek 3, but, so Scotty somehow in the future, I guess, develops a transwarp formula where
presumably taking apart Dominion transporters, who, they had that technology.
So you can now in the Kelvin movies, you can beam from planet to somewhere else in a different solar system, which they use in the next movie. Yeah, if you have Scotty's secret.
Did they do it in the next movie?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And if they do not have a bunch of transwarp beaming going on in Picard, I, for one, will be disappointed.
Yeah, me too.
Old Spock promised me transwarp beaming at the end of the 24th century.
What if Scotty only told old Spock because he needed someone to like help him with the math?
Why would young Scotty's like beaming the Admiral's dog away? Why would old Scotty keep it a secret?
That's ridiculous that dog from Enterprise would still be alive.
I assume it's a different dog.
Yeah, it can't still be Porthos.
I'm sure Admiral Archer goes
through
his
50th beagle.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I don't like Archer still being alive or being an admiral.
A, it doesn't have to be the same Archer, but B, why not? How old would Archer?
Because in
McCoy lived 165 years. How old would Archer be at that point?
In Through a Mirror Darkly, it says that he died in 2345.
All right, fair enough.
And that he had been president of the Federation, which is so much more cooler than being an admiral.
All right, fair enough. I'll give you that one. Yeah.
It's actually really cool. It says that he died.
Screwed that up.
He died the day after Robert April launched on the 1701. So it's like he lived long enough to pass the baton.
Is this something they said out loud?
No, it's on the computer file. It's still on screen, so it's canon.
Yeah, but do you get a close up of it where you can actually read it?
You know what I'm going to say is that there was an Admiral Archer that his friends kind of talked about his at least the name similarity to the former president of the of Starfleet or
the Federation.
Wow, that's big. Yeah. And they got him a beagle at some point as a joke, which became his beloved beagle, and there we have it.
Scotty and Kirk get back on the Enterprise, and I think they totally should have cut this when Scotty is trapped in like that water pipe. We don't really need that, but
yeah.
No, this is where we have Hendorf, the security guard, who
Cupcake.
Yeah, you got to remember that bar fight was 3 years before this.
Yeah.
So when he's like running up that ramp and across that catwalk to like arrest Kirk at phaser point. You had to be thinking, like, I still remember 3 years ago when you called me Cupcake.
I assume that they were at the academy together. He kept calling him Cupcake continuously for 3 years. Well,
I
totally
kind of assumed that too, but my way of describing it was funnier. We get Scotty and Kirk in custody, and then we have the big confrontation between Kirk and Spock, which is very much a faithful callback to, is it the episode This Side of Paradise? With where Spock gets high on the spores and falls in love, and Kirk has to like piss him off to get it out of the system.
Yeah,
and he starts like taunting him, talking about his heritage as a half Vulcan, half human, and
poking all his most emotionally vulnerable points.
What I love is that this movie, unlike a bunch of Star Trek, keeps in mind that Vulcans are a lot stronger than humans.
Oh,
and so we have Spock just smacking Kirk around, even though it is weird that the hero of the movie gets slapped around so much. It always makes sense when it's happening, though.
You do see also with the kid Vulcans fighting. They are not just kids punching each other. They're like serious strength behind those blows. It's like some kid superheroes fighting.
I love the Vulcan bullies. I love, we've prepared have you prepared new insults for me today? Affirmative. Like, that's how Vulcan kids would bully each other.
Yeah, and he's like, this is your 37th attempt to elicit emotion. So like, it's very much almost like a mathematical formula today. I think, by the way, the movie does a really good job with those emotionally intense scenes, like where he breaks Spock down and Spock whoops up on him, and then Spock has to realize that he is emotionally compromised. I think those are some of their stronger scenes.
And then they make it kind of an event when Kirk takes the captain's chair.
Even though he doesn't get the gold until the very end of the movie.
And even though he was actually sitting in it earlier, when Spock tells him get out of the chair. But and it's understandable here that Uhura and McCoy, the two people who have known Kirk the longest, we can assume, they're both very skeptical. This part where there's like, I hope you know what you're doing. They're kind of like mad at him.
Well, I think Uhura is very skeptical. I think McCoy's like, all right, we'll see where this goes.
I like him, but
does describe him as the prize stallion. So McCoy clearly respects.
Yeah, he's got some faith in him. Not as much as Prime Spock seems to have.
Yeah,
and I do love the idea of Spock being like, this is my best friend Kirk. The way to solve this crisis and stop Nero is to put him in the captain's chair on the Enterprise. That always works. And I like that idea of Nimoy Spock remembering all the cool shit that Shatner Kirk did, and he has that faith into Chris Pine Kirk, if that makes sense, if you follow that.
And Nimoy's superb in this.
Yes.
I mean, he's it's just
was there some possibility, Father, that like Shatner was going to have been in the movie?
There was some flirtation with that they would have Spock actually brings like a holographic recording of Kirk from before he died, but they thought that seemed...
I'm so glad Spock got to carry the load, that is to say Nimoy got to be the grounding force.
And part of what made this movie so acceptable was Nimoy's presence gave it so much validation. And it was cool at the time to have, like, okay, Leonard Nimoy as Spock. He was there at the very beginning in the cage.
Yeah.
The only character that they kept onto the original series, and then he was in so many movies, and then he even showed up in Berman Trek in The Next Generation. And it's like, we have, like, this one guy who's, like, carried the torch all the way through from the cage until this new Star Trek 09 movie. And to me, it made it more acceptable to me to have that in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have Kirk in command. The big climax of the movie, they go after Nero because, of course, this being a Star Trek movie, Earth has to be in danger, and he's trying to blow up... Or I like that he targets San Francisco Bay just because, like, that's like a big fuck you to Starfleet.
Yeah.
But and then
he's arguably pretty good at revenge.
Well, that's his only thing they give him.
He had 20 years to come up with a plan. He
knocked one planet out like that. So yeah,
don't they actually say they're going to go and destroy the rest of the worlds in the Federation?
Yeah.
They're
so
just
he wants to just because anything that there was a obstacle to the Romulans, he was going to.
Yeah, and you would think after the Federation, you'd probably go after the Klingons and the Cardassians and just
everyone.
What a dick.
Yeah.
That would be like, for real, that'd be like the greatest mass murderer in like the Star Trek universe if he pulled off his plan.
So some very devoted miners in his crew.
Like no one
like,
questions
we're gonna hang out for 25 years, and then I'm gonna get my revenge. And they're like, okay, well, somebody bring a deck of cards.
And it's weird that there's no chicks on the ship. It's just like a bunch of dudes hanging around. I mean,
isn't there one? I thought there was.
There was one in deleted scenes that they cut out.
Ah, okay.
And they actually got like a badass martial artist chick to play her because she was gonna do some actiony stuff.
Oh yeah,
they cut that out.
The sequence Zachary Quinto spent forever training for, and then they cut it.
Oh man,
he spent all this time training for a fight.
Does the scene still exist?
No,
I've never seen it. They shot it. I don't even think they shot it.
Right before the end stuff, I do want to say that the phaser battle on the Narada is pretty cool. Even though I like my beam sort of weapon phasers, or a little more beam-like and not bolty.
Nick Meyer gave us the bolt, so blame him.
In
the Wrath of Khan,
but they still saw
the pistols had beams.
You still saw beams.
The handheld phasers, or the ship phasers.
Yeah, I think. Are you talking about the ship, the personal combat, or the ship to ship combat?
Personal combat, but also like I think that like you still see beam arcs and not like bolts. That where this movie kind of went full energy bolts.
Yeah.
But I bring this up to compliment it. It's a good scene. There's a lot of clatter and noise as their guns chip away like chunks of metal and like burn through things, and so it's like you feel like these phasers are kind of more dangerous than phasers have been in a little while.
The hand phasers, I think it is like too showy and weird when they have like
the
flippy spin around to go from kill to stun. But I do like that you have like blue for stun, red for kill, which Discovery borrowed. We see that in Discovery also. But they don't do like the flippy thing, so Discovery fixed it. We got to talk about the interior of the Narada though, because it is ridiculous, where they have like these giant chasms
and pools and like it seems like infinite like little like balconies and decks and things.
I assume it makes more sense when they're mining, I guess.
Yeah, right, if you turn the lights on, what you would actually see is that there's just all this equipment and stuff in between those.
They had never shown Romulans to be as strong as Vulcans. I always thought it'd be cool if, like, what if the Romulans didn't have, like, that Vulcan strength? And that would kind of explain, like, their, they just gotta, like, try harder. But here, because they wanted this to be, like, a big, fun action movie with menacing villains, they make these Romulans strong enough to beat the shit out of Kirk.
Yep. And Eric Bana's good at doing that.
They hit the emotional notes when he's taunting him about, like, James T. Kirk was a great man, but I will deprive you of that future, just like I deprived your father of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of good beats like that in there.
Well, what about the Spock on the jellyfish? What do you think of that ship? That was designed by Brian Hitch, of all people. Very, is it fair to call him a prolific comic book artist? He's done quite a bit of stuff.
I always forget that he designed the ship. I don't really like the ship.
Yeah.
Well, I hate that it's called the Jellyfish. I don't mind that as a behind-the-scenes production name, but the fact that it's officially canon that it's the Jellyfish,
the eagle.
I can only assume that in its original Vulcan, it's much more poetic.
I think the Eagle Moss model, which I own, I think it's like officially called like Spock's Jellyfish.
That sounds even worse. I'm sorry. Jellyfish, I'm sure jellyfish in Vulcan is beautiful, and it has all sorts of symbolic meaning that the Earth word jellyfish doesn't carry, but they should have left it in its original
Get in
Vulcan.
the boing dongler.
Yeah.
But I love that action sequence where it turns into like a car chase where Spock is flying around on the jellyfish and Nero is like screaming Spock, and it does kind of echo Kirk screaming Khan, except it's flipped where it's like the bad guy screaming the name of one of the good guys.
And I love how Spock leads him away from Earth out to where the Enterprise is parked near Saturn so that the Enterprise can sucker punch them.
And you get Sulu has like that cool moment where he like comes in command of the Enterprise shooting the phasers. And then you have Scotty has something to do with he beams everyone back. They get Pike back.
Yeah.
And then the red matter explosion where all that red matter is like bubbling and then like shrinks down, disappears, and then you have like that explosion of the black hole forming. Yeah. That was like so cool and spectacular and really like sells the climax of the movie. Yeah. Now we do have...
It's hard to make ship explosions kind of cool again, and
we've seen it so often.
Yeah, J.J. Abrams found it, like he filmed them and literally just filmed them in such a way that it kind of re-energized it.
Well, but this is a little problematic, especially for Dave, with the execution of Nero.
Yeah. Let's see. Kirk offers him a helping hand. Nero says, "I'd rather die," and Kirk, very, I would say, enthusiastically, is like, "You got it." And then he's like, "Give him everything. Give him both barrels."
This guy was just a few minutes before this. He was just saying like, "I'm gonna kill you like I killed your dad, bitch."
He also had killed 6 billion Vulcans.
I know. It's the way. Yeah. It's that it doesn't feel like Kirk and Starfleet to me. If he had said, even if he was like kind of trying a little bit till the last minute or something, like saying like trying to appeal to the crew, said like, this doesn't have to end this way. Or something like that.
As the writers have mentioned, and again, we shouldn't need the writers to explain these things, but at least they did.
Yes.
Kirk was really worried that whatever went into that black hole could pop up in the future or the past and screw up history again. So sitting around having a long conversation while Nero and his Romulans get dumped into the past.
If that had been in the movie, I would have been down with it. Or if Kirk had expressed some concern, it's like if he had said to like Spock, it's like he's like, "There's no time to do this," like Sulu hit him or whatever, or check out fire. But he kind of, it's just a little too gleeful for me. It feels anti-Star Trek.
I don't have a problem with it, and to me, it would have felt like you were doing the movie a misservice if you did have Kirk try to put in that much effort into saving this guy's life, who had just murdered billions, who's like any war crime.
If they were going to have him extend the offer to do it,
he did.
If they were going to do that, though,
I think his obligation is done at that point. He tried. I think this is handled immensely better than I'm going to take a time to punch down at Star Trek Insurrection. When they just don't even try to save F. Murray Abraham, they just beam Picard up and let F. Murray Abraham blow up on the thing.
Yeah,
I think it works. I think that worked better for me. I think
I would have rather had.
I don't mind villains getting their just desserts,
except if it's Nero.
Except if the heroes think it's neat and it's like, if Kirk almost could have said like, "In your fucking face." And I don't want that vibe coming off of my Starfleet.
I didn't quite get
brain.
that much clear and gleeful. I didn't get it.
You got it.
No, I just watched the movie. It didn't feel as gleeful to me.
He certainly
wasn't
appropriate
unhappy.
Time to say "fuck you" to somebody when like the guy who's like, "I just killed your dad and I just killed this planet and no, I don't want you to save me." If it's not appropriate to say "fuck you" to that person,
and apparently, according to this old Spock guy, I ruined your whole life by killing your dad.
Yeah.
So you would have been something so much better than you are now if I hadn't killed your dad.
That cool escape of like the Enterprise from the black hole and Scotty saying...
When it's hanging right in that like sort of mid-range point between being pulled in and not is a really cool visual.
I did think it was odd that they said eject the warp core,
and it's
singular,
it's
and
not
we
a
get
core,
multiple
it's a bunch of pods.
things. So.
Maybe the core like broke down into a bunch of pods and then gets ejected.
I mean, it's not a huge deal.
When the bridge starts like cracking, and like... It really doesn't make sense when they just established earlier in this movie, which I think is kind of dumb, that in warp drive, space is the thing that's moving. And somehow, like, Scotty never thought of that until Spock showed him the transwarp formula.
They said it when they were talking about transwarp drive. Where else did they say that?
Well, nowhere else. But here, it's weird that, okay, so when you're at warp, like, space is the thing that's moving, but, like, you're at warp and you're not going anywhere because, like, this black hole is holding you down. I don't know, that just...
I felt like when Scotty said that, when he said it never occurred to me to think of space as the thing that was moving, it was literally just a throwaway line from them, their version of technobabble, but with no thought put into it.
Yeah, I'm saying they don't put a lot of thought into the technobabbly stuff in these movies.
It's true.
I do love that we get like a good fan service that like fits in, even though it's so cheap to have Scotty say, "I'm giving her all she's got, Captain," but
sure,
they throw those nods
I think it was earned in that instance.
Yeah. Earlier in the movie we get "Damn it, man, I'm a doctor, not a physicist."
Sure.
And, the live long and prosper.
When I wasn't feeling inclined to be nice to the movie, those things bugged me. But honestly, it's reasonable fan service for kind of reinvigorating the franchise. And again, I kind of liked that people who were otherwise not big Trek fans, but who maybe knew some of that stuff, kind of got to feel those moments. They got to feel like they were part of the club, and Trek should be inclusive.
It is so triumphant when we see the Enterprise, and it's just like this tiny dot coming out of that giant blue explosion, and then it just soars, and so does the music soars, and it just feels so victorious.
Mm-hmm.
And we get the ending where we have another little fan servicey bit, and that is Pike in a wheelchair.
Yep.
And I thought that was it was almost a little subtle how they put it in like a very not like the guy in a box with his head sticking out.
Right.
And then Spock watching like the Kirk promotion from that balcony, and he just says, thrusters on full. I felt like very like Nicholas Meyer nautical thing.
The only way I can make sense of Kirk going from third year cadet, not fourth year cadet, third year cadet to captain in the space of a few months is that old Spock went into the talk to the Starfleet and said, listen, I know some things about the future, and that guy needs to be on that starship, and if you want to know what I want to know, you're going to make it happen.
So Spock just full-on violates the prime directive, the temporal prime directive.
I think he's balancing things for whatever Nero screwed up, just like the private little war where we give our side exactly the same advance.
Sure, yeah, I can buy that. I mean, that was my biggest problem with this movie, was always going from a cadet to a captain in a day. But it is kind of forgivable in the fact that you want the next movie to already have the captains, even though in the next movie they undo that and give them the same arc again, which is a weird choice, but we'll get to that next week. I thought it was weird in the bar scene when Pike says you can be an officer in 4 years and get your own ship in 8, and I think they put that in there to make the ending feel less weird. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, but
it was 3, not 8.
Yeah. Instead of saying 4 years, I'll do it in 3, you should have said 8 years, I'll do it in 3.
Yeah. I guess so.
To me, I mean, I can't help but think that it's just a weak plot point of theirs.
It probably was. I am going to give them... I love the movie enough that I will go the extra mile with my head.
Yeah. The way, as you describe it, it kind of fits in nicely there.
Yeah.
There's an outro voiceover from Nimoy, which also kind of brings it all home again. They close with a rendition of the original Star Trek.
Alexander Courage theme
music, yeah. It's a pretty classy way to do it.
Yeah, the biggest thing problem I have, is that it's a good movie, but I'm not sure if it's a Star Trek movie because it focuses entirely on emotions, and there's no... Star Trek has pretty much always been about something, and every other Star Trek movie before or after this has been about something.
Well, there's I'm just saying this on the fly. I don't have any necessarily coherent thought, but Nero's loss propels him to become kind of unspeakably vengeful. Kirk's loss almost brings him down, but given the right circumstances, catapults him into greatness.
Nero is the anti-Spock. Spock loses his planet, loses his family, and Nero does too, and we see how these two Vulcanoids deal with it differently, and how Spock almost could become another Nero, and does not. And I can just about see that. The problem is a lot of that Nero backstory isn't as well developed in the movie as it is in the expanded universe. So I kind of hate to give it that one, but it's kind of there.
This isn't Spock's movie, it's Kirk's movie.
Well, that's another flaw against it.
Spock is pretty front and center, though.
I know, but the movie opens with Kirk's birth, and it ends with his ascent to the captaincy.
Yeah.
The idea if Nero is the anti-Kirk, that would probably work more about if it's about like using the past.
But was Kirk ever tempted to become this raged monster?
Yeah, they don't really build that into it.
Well, it's more like Kirk's would have been derailed from the person we know. Like he came kind of precariously close to it.
Yeah.
I will say that it almost has the message that Dave has suggested, and I think that's a good point, but I'll say that it doesn't quite encapsulate that.
There's no doubt about me that in my mind that they didn't have a very coherent thing. Yeah. That there was, in many ways, a collection of very watchable scenes about getting our family together of crew members that we like. And I did like that, they immediately began with all those crew members, her and Chekhov and all those guys at the forefront.
It's like a meta thing. It's like, look at all these familiar things you're at least aware of on a pop cultural level, and don't you want to see them all get together?
Which is why we come back to the Time Force is the message of the film.
I'd be interested to hear anybody else's thoughts on that specifically too. Like, do you think there is one? Do you think you can finesse one out of it with a little work?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all we have on Star Trek 09, but I know that there's so many opinions out there on this movie, so by all means let us know. Tell us if you love it, if you hate it, if you're mixed. And what you think about some of the things we brought up. Did we bring anything new to your attention, or do you think you have something to add to our conversation?
We didn't talk too much about it, but certainly it did lead a lot of people in, and you'd mentioned talking to a lot of people who came into it. And I'd be curious to hear if there was any other experiences with that, with like where it fits in people's personal pantheon.
I would wager that some of our audience might have had this as their Star Trek gateway drug.
Quite possibly.
So if that's the case, for sure, let us know.
It's like starting with crack.
And let us know if
speed.
Yeah, this is the speed of Star Trek.
Yeah.
If you have anything to say about Star Trek Into Darkness or Star Trek Beyond, we will be talking about those soon. So let us know ahead of time if you have any thoughts on that, and maybe it's something that we can use when we get to those discussions. Of course, that'll be next week on Sunday, Star Trek Into Darkness. And until then, as always, live long and prosper, y'all. Thank all of you so much for checking out this installment of TEX-TREK. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to like our YouTube videos and subscribe to our channel. Audio-only version of episodes are available at our website, www.tex-trek.com. Please check out our site, especially if you just want an audio-only podcast. We have that available for you. Y'all can also keep up with us online. You can follow us on Twitter at TEX-TREK, or you can check us out on Facebook at www.facebook.com/tex-trek. Please, by all means, let us know what you think by dropping a comment anywhere you see fit. We definitely want to hear your feedback. Let us know what you liked and what you would like to see more of, what you would like to see differently going forward. If you want to email me directly, go ahead. I can be reached at fatherlyactual@tex-trek.com. Thank all y'all again. Take care.